Right, I'm the artist taxi driver, and I'm here with, I'm going to get this right, the Right Honourable, the Baroness Jones of Moulsecoomb. Is Moulsecoomb?
Moulsecoomb.
Moulsecoomb. It's quite interesting because I looked up Moulsecoomb and because I wanted to see it because it said it was an estate, but it's not like Sandringham, is it? Or
No, it's a council estate.
the Baroness of a council estate.
It's where I grew up.
Isn't it?
It's quite deprived now. Actually, it's going through tough times.
Yeah, I saw that. Is it a lot of crime, a lot of social deprivation?
Yeah. I mean, it was lovely when I lived there, because it was just after the war and everybody was sort of mucking in and so on. You know, good neighbours, that sort of thing. But it's hard.
So you're a life peer. You were the Deputy Mayor of London.
Under Ken.
Under Ken, you're a member of the London Assembly for the Green Party. I just went into the City Hall. I was speaking to one of the security. I went up to the chamber.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I said, this is incredible. And he said, yeah, Boris normally sits there and Jenny Jones is over there and there's smoke coming out of her ears, he said.
Yeah, quite often. Boris is a really tough case because I'm sure you've met him. He's very funny, he's very charming, and obviously incredibly intelligent. And the big problem I have with him is that he doesn't use it for the good of London. I just think he's wasted 4 years an opportunity when he could have done so much. And actually he hasn't. He's just built up his own reputation, written his book, visited a few foreign countries and so on. Just seems a waste.
He's a Conservative. He's involved with corporations. He's not going to be for people. He's for austerity. What about austerity, Jenny?
The Green Party is anti-austerity. We would do as much as we possibly can. I mean, part of the really big problem now is that we've got this opening gap between rich and poor, and that's something we would very much like to see closed. And there's all sorts of ways you can do it, not least making sure that everybody has a living wage. And the national minimum wage, I'm afraid, just doesn't cut it. It's just not enough to live on, especially here in London. And so we've since Ken Livingstone's days, we've had the London Living Wage. And quite honestly, I think that every single company in London should pay it. And companies like John Lewis refuse to pay it. They outsource their cleaners. They don't stipulate on the contracts that their cleaners should be paid the London Living Wage. And so they're on the national minimum wage.
But the guy I was just talking to there when I was waiting for you, he's saying they want to contract out the night staff. And then he said, well, be next, and the admin will go.
Exactly. I mean, the Greens on the Assembly have been fighting this. I might be maligning people, but the other political parties seem not quite as worried as we are, because they think it's progress and you can't argue against it.
But that's the whole thing about, to me, austerity, the movement of public money into private pockets.
Exactly. Yes.
So this whole Labour thing is pushing down on the workers, pushing down on their contracts, their holiday pay, their sick pay.
Absolutely. And also, you know, it's not any sort of guaranteed income for any of the security staff that they'll bring in from the private company, whereas the people that we've got there, they've been working for us for years and they know the routines and they know the building and the people and that sort of thing. They're much less likely to be fooled if there's a problem, you know.
But it's this massive shift, isn't it? Because under the cloak of austerity, they're moving into all the public sector. They want it to go into private, which moves all the profits.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And the Green Party is absolutely against this. I mean, for example, we would renationalise the railways. I don't know if you know, there's a website called Vote for Policies, and on that the Greens have got the biggest percentage of all the parties, i.e. that people look at the website without knowing which political party puts the policies forward, and they actually like our policies best, one of which of course is renationalise the railways and protect the NHS. I mean, these are all things that
but this whole austerity thing, how do they get away with it? How do they?
Well, you pass laws and you make it happen. And I was listening to something on the radio yesterday about the NHS, and they were saying that the government has simply failed to order enough nurses from the training colleges, which means we've got a shortage of nurses, which means we have to have more agency nurses in, which actually costs the NHS more. And you start to think, why don't you just pay the nurses that you're employing through the NHS better, and then you won't need the agency staff.
But the whole thing, the Tories, the Lib Dem, the Labour are talking about austerity, but saying we'll do austerity in a different way. But I mean, it seems like in Westminster there's a lockdown on austerity. This is the way we're going to go.
The thing about the Green Party is, for us, the other political parties are pretty much the same. We tend to talk about them as the grey parties because they are all into this idea that the economy has to massively grow and austerity, of course. And we're saying it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, the fact is we've got one planet, we've got a limited amount of resources, and we have to live within that.
But what's really weird is they want to take it, so they talk about austerity, they want to take it out of here, but on the other side, we've got 375 billion of quantitative easing, we got bailouts to private companies like banks, which are private companies, and then when they become state-owned, we're still paying them bonuses.
I completely agree. I mean, on the quantitative easing, for example, it might have been better, instead of paying it actually to companies, it would have been better probably to give every person in the UK, or every low-paid person in the UK, £20 or £50 or £100 or whatever you could, because those are the people who are going to actually spend and sort of kickstart the economy from the very bottom. This whole Tory policy of trickle down, which is still in favour here in Britain, is complete nonsense, and even Labour seems to think that's sort of okay, that, you know, if the rich have enough money then they'll spend, but actually they don't.
But where is the money? Because the money collected in taxes, okay, the tax revenues apparently are down a little bit, but it's still 1.2, 1.3 trillion. So for instance, since 2010, virtually no public sector pay rise. So if you take the NHS, that's 60% of the budget goes on pay. Where are the billions upon billions upon billions that they've saved in public sector pay? Where is that money?
I don't know. You sound more up on it than I am. I literally don't know. I mean, to me, this makes no sense at all, the path we're on. And, you know, if I had to choose between a Labour government or a Tory government in May this year, I would say, all right, marginally better to have a Labour government and hopefully some sort of coalition where they might need the 1, 2, 3.
But you're in the London Assembly, so we're living in the City of London, which I call the City of Corruption, where you have like massive mining companies. Shell just got £11 billion deal, like with a new gas thing in Iraq. We're asset stripping. We're stealing other people's resources. We're inviting oligarchs and all sorts of despots to come and use our financial services. What are you doing about it?
Well, to be fair, we do talk about this sort of stuff quite a lot. We only have one MP, we only have one peer, which is me. And obviously the House of Lords is an unelected chamber, which we don't really recognise as part of a democracy. So it's not that easy. At City Hall we speak out on stuff like this, but quite honestly we've got no power. If you're not in government, it's very hard to make things
So you have no power over the City of London, over the financial
No. Nobody has power over the City of London. They are an entity unto themselves. And of course, we think that should change. It's absolutely ludicrous that they have control of so much real estate and so much money, and yet, again, they're completely undemocratic. I think they have, I mean, the number of voters in the City of London is absolutely tiny because hardly anybody lives there. And so they give big business votes so that they can vote people onto the council.
But I've interviewed people in here. I interviewed an indigenous Indian, an incredible lady who came from Colombia, from the Kerolong coal mine, where we take coal from there. They've all got asthma and the water's polluted. A young kid, he came all the way from Philippines to stand up at shareholders meeting in London, BHP Billiton, asking the shareholders to divest because 10,000 of these people have been displaced, 67 people have been killed by the militias. Where's London's morals?
I'm chairing the economy committee at City Hall at the moment, and I've started various pieces of work on climate change and the fact that, for example, we heavily invest as for example, our pension funds heavily invest in fossil fuels. Now, there could be something called the carbon bubble, which is when those fossil fuels actually become unusable and therefore worthless, simply because we can't burn them because we're contributing so fast to climate change. So this carbon bubble, like the South Sea bubble, could burst at some point. All of our pension funds are heavily invested in fossil fuels. Could be very, very nasty. And I've done a piece of work on this. And I've gone to the Bank. I went to the Bank of England last year, and they had their 6-monthly report. And in the meeting afterwards, I said, "Well, where's climate change in this report?" And they literally went, "Oh, do you know, the Department of the Environment said we should do something on climate change. We'll do it next time. I mean, that's how plugged in the Bank of England is to the fact that climate change is having an immediate aspect on virtually every part of the global economy.
But see, that's why they're clever. That's why the City of London's clever. If you take like Northern Rock, for instance, so when it was going bust and people saying, oh, how can I get my money out? You know, what they do is they take people's debt and say like Greece's debt, for instance, and they spread it out, don't they? So then it becomes the debt of the firefighters and the nurses of London, or it becomes their pensions are involved, you know, their profits.
We've got some big problems here. If we're going to produce a manifesto, the Green Party's manifesto, in about a month, I think, and we will tackle some of these problems because it's a manifesto for government. We're hoping, or we're expecting, there will probably be a coalition government where they might need however many MPs we've got, in which case we will argue for these things.
But all of people's pensions are linked into like these nefarious, like whether it's your climate change or whether it's other countries' debt, whether it's our own debt. So they say if that bank goes down, if this energy company goes down, you go down.
I mean, to some extent, we've seen things like that, haven't we? I mean, Greece and banks and so on. But at the same time, somehow we recover from them because we spend so much money. And it seems to me that it's time to stop. Actually, you know, if something collapses, it has to collapse. And if you buy it out, it's a national resource and we don't sell it on. I mean, London, basically, how I see it is London, the City of London. We have no morals, do you know what I mean? Globally, or you know, we're all tied in to the system. One of the things that the Greens would like to do, and I know this sounds as if it's moving away completely from these big issues you're talking about, but for example, at the moment we import stacks and stacks of food that we could also produce here in Britain. And the fact is, every time we buy some apples from South Africa or wherever, we are, to some extent, exporting our money. We're actually allowing money to go out of the economy. And we should think much more about keeping money in our local economy. We should care much more about small businesses, micro businesses, little corner shops. I was on the council in Southwark, for 4 years. And in that time, I managed to stop a Tesco Metro being built just down the road from me because I knew it would impact on the little shops nearby. And the thing about the little shops is their money circulates a lot within the local economy because they employ local economy people and so on. Whereas the Tesco, the money gets sort of siphoned out immediately.
That's the problem with the free market. We're going to come back in 1 second.